Hello, I'm Dfpolis. Welcome to another Open Philosophy video. In this video we'll be discussing some criticisms made by Daniel Theophage Clark. Theophage means God-eater, as illustrated in his opening sequence. Oops. Daniel is courteous, honest, and rational, and I'm sure he won't mind my little joke on his opening.
There are three particular claims that Dennis makes during this series of videos on the laws of nature that I think are incorrect. The first is that the laws of nature are not properties of matter itself, do not arise from the properties of matter itself, that they represent a separate immaterial reality that is both logically prior to matter and is the cause of how matter behaves. The second point is that the laws of nature are intentional, that they show intention. This is kind of like thoughts in the human mind. Thoughts refer to something other than themselves. If I think of an elephant, my thought refers to something outside of my head, an actual elephant. Dennis claims that laws of nature are similar in that sense, in that they also refer to something other than themselves. For example, the law of conservation of energy does not refer to the law itself, but it refers to the conservation of energy, something other than the law. Finally, Dennis says that not only are the laws of nature immaterial and intentional, but they also directly point to the existence of God because they are constant. He says that if the laws are constant, then there must be some law holding that laws are constant. But if there is a law that holds that laws are constant, then there must be another law holding that the law of laws is constant, etc., into an infinite regress, and that God is the solution to that problem of infinite regress. Dennis notes that the properties of objects can have different values, and that the laws of nature are universal, that is, the same for all applicable objects. This makes it sound like the laws can't be properties because they don't vary from object to object, but that really isn't a good objection. The first reason being because a property doesn't need to have a whole range of values. Something could be a binary property, either a thing has it or it doesn't. We could say that charged particles, for example, have the property of electric charge and thus give rise to laws having to do with electric charge, and non-charged particles don't have that.
Of course, this objection doesn't work. First of all, charge takes on many values. Quarks have charges ranging from minus 2/3 to minus 1/3 and on to plus 1/3 and plus 2/3. Other particles have charges ranging from minus 2 to plus 2. So, charge varies. But even if Daniel was correct that charge was binary, it would still have multiple values. It would either be charged or not charged. And that was my point. The properties vary, while the laws of nature are universal, applying to all matter.
But we can take that even further with the fact that physicists consider things like electrons to all be completely identical. Any given electron may be in a different quantum state than another one, but other than quantum state there is no difference between two electrons. Thus, any physical laws arising from the properties of electrons would naturally be universal to all of them.
Of course, I was not claiming that the same properties can't be found in more than one thing.
Lastly, as a materialist, if I want to say that the laws of nature are properties of matter, must I be confined to saying that they are the properties of individual pieces of matter? Or can I simply say that the laws of nature are properties of the material universe itself? If they are properties of the material universe itself, then it is no wonder why all matter within the universe must obey them universally.
Here we come to the critical point. Whereas ordinary properties inhere in particular objects, the laws of nature don't. In fact, they are arguably prior to the existence of the universe. Naturalist physicists like Victor Stenger and Stephen Hawking have argued that we don't need God because the laws of nature can create the universe out of nothing. If the laws of nature are creating the universe out of nothing, then the laws of nature are operating prior to the existence of the universe. Since they are ontologically prior to the universe, they do not depend on it and cannot be its properties. But even if you disagree, even if you think that the laws are not able to create the universe out of nothing, they're still prior to properties and to matter. Why? Because they are the explanation of properties and matter. When we want to explain some physical properties, we appeal to the laws of nature. That makes them logically prior to the properties that they explain.
Then we get to something called Nether's theorem. In 1918, German mathematician Emmy Nether showed that conservation laws in nature arise directly from symmetries of matter in the material universe. The laws of conservation of energy and momentum, for example, are due to the fact that space and time have translational symmetry, and the conservation of angular momentum is because space has rotational symmetry. Unlike Dennis's assertion that laws are logically prior to matter and don't arise from properties of matter, it seems that Nether's theorem says he's wrong. Certainly it would be the case that if space and time had different properties, did not have these symmetries, then the laws of nature would be different.
Here again, Daniel has made a critical error. He's misstated Emmy Nether's theorem. Emmy Nether's theorem does not say that the conservation laws are the result of symmetries of space. It says that the conservation laws are the result of symmetries of the dynamics. In fact, if you know anything about the general theory of relativity, you know that space is warped. It's not symmetric. It's not symmetric rotationally, and it's not symmetric translationally. So the properties that are required to produce the conservation laws don't even belong to space.
Throughout his series on the laws of nature, Dennis has warned us not to confuse the laws of nature themselves with the physicist's description and understanding of these laws. It seems that he commits exactly that error here. The reason why the law of conservation of energy seems to be about energy is because he isn't talking about the actual natural law itself, but our mental concept of that law. That mental concept is about yet another mental concept, that of energy. The natural law itself is simply a feature of the material universe, due, according to Nether's theorem, to the translational symmetry of time. Because space-time is this way, matter in space-time behaves a certain way. There is no about in there, except if we confuse the property of the material world with our mental concept of that property. In short, Dennis, I'm afraid you're just plain wrong.
In my video on the intentionality of the laws, I draw a comparison between the laws of nature and committed human intentions. And so let's look at that comparison again. The reason that my committed intention to go to the store is an intention is not because I have some thought describing that intention. It is because that intention itself is about an action beyond itself. In the same way, the laws of nature are about actions beyond themselves. The law of conservation of energy conserves a property of matter. It does not conserve an idea. So the laws are intentional because they, like committed human intentions, will bring about future actions.
Once again, the problem of infinite regression that Dennis describes is due to an improper understanding of what the laws of nature actually are. If they are merely entities that are distinct from the properties of matter and the material universe, as well as being about something other than themselves, then of course you'd need a meta-law to refer to the law, and so forth.
Now let's look at the logic of my proof in video 15. What I said did not depend in any way on the laws either not being properties of matter or on their being intentional. All that really matters for the proof is that the laws are explanations which are required in order to do science. If we get rid of the idea that phenomena are always supported by laws of nature, that they always have dynamical explanations, then science becomes impossible. So whether or not you believe that the laws are properties whether or not you believe that the laws are intentional is really irrelevant to the argument of video 15.
And of course, once again, we see God used as a stopgap for reasoning gone awry, rather than recognizing that the reasoning that requires the stopgap because it is flawed to begin with.
I have 2 points to make in response to this. First, Daniel has not shown that my reasoning has gone awry. We've seen that his objections on issue 1 and issue 2 both fall apart under analysis. They don't hold water. Secondly, the argument which I make in video 15 is not a God of gaps argument. A God of gaps argument uses God as a hypothesis to explain something which science is not able to explain. The argument in video 15 is not hypothetical, it is a deduction. It works like a mathematical theorem proof. Theorem proofs don't depend on hypotheses. The argument which I make in video 15 has no hypotheses. It merely starts with premises about the existence of objects and their persistence, and about the need for scientific explanations in terms of concurrent laws operating in order to affect the phenomena that we observe. From these premises I deduce in a strict way the existence of an end of the line of explanation, an end of the line that keeps the laws in operation and through them all of the material universe. There is no hypothesis of God. Something which keeps the laws of the universe in operation, and through them all of matter, is necessarily something which meets the definition of God. If we look in the dictionary, we see that the definition of God is the supreme being, the creator and ruler of the universe. But the end of the line of explanation is necessarily the supreme being. It is the logically prior source of everything else. Contemporary cosmologists such as Stephen Hawking argue that the universe was created through the operation of the laws of nature. So, whatever keeps the laws in operation is necessarily the creator. And finally, whatever keeps the laws in operation is necessarily the ruler of the universe, because the universe is ruled via the laws. So, what we discover as a result of our deduction is something which meets the dictionary definition of God and is therefore properly called God. This is not a hypothesis, it is a deduction.
If, as I contend, the laws of nature are due to the properties of matter and the material universe, then the only thing required to keep them constant is the notion that a thing is itself and not something else. If it is itself, then it must have its properties.
Remember that the argument is about the persistence of the laws of nature. It's not merely about their instantaneous existence. When I was 30, I had a full head of hair. That was one of my properties. But the fact that I had a full head of hair at 30 does not explain the persistence of my hair, and in fact, my hair did not persist, as you can well see.
Does it make any sense to require God to have a meta rule over him to keep him consistent with his own nature and properties? If not, then why would the material world require something to keep it consistent with its own nature and properties?
The proof that I give is an existence proof. An existence proof merely shows that something exists. It doesn't explain why it exists, and it doesn't elaborate its properties. The purpose of this video, video 15, was to complete my discussion of the laws of nature. It was not to give an elaborate natural theology and explain all of the properties of God and why he has them and why it is rational to think that he is self-sufficient and so on. I do have an explanation, and that explanation is given on my website. I have not made a series of videos about natural theology. I have made a series of videos about the laws of nature and how God stands in relation to those laws. So if you're interested in knowing how it is that God is able to explain himself, you can look at my website, or you can wait until I make the video in a few months.
There simply is no infinite regression to need to invent a deity to fix.
Daniel has simply not done what he needs to do. He needs to explain why some phenomena need an explanation in terms of laws, and others don't. If we make an exception to the general rules of science in order to please atheists, where is that to stop? Thank you for watching.